there's a big difference between being busy and being productive. Is I can sit here and fiddle around on my phone or send emails, do all this, and I'm like, oh, I would just work for 15 hours straight. Give me a cookie, give me my reward. But how productive was I, not only in accomplishing the tasks that I sought out to accomplish, but then moving myself along this larger spectrum that I'm trying to move as I develop as a person. It's kind of like that old thing we talk about in military, slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Hello, my name is Aaron Wexler. Welcome to another episode of Within the Game. Let's go! Within the Game is all about sharing inspiration, and I love doing this podcast. So thank you to the fan. If you guys are with me on this podcast journey, I just appreciate you, and I love bringing you guys guests from all different kinds of backgrounds, and I'm really excited about today's guest. Today's guest is the one and only Matt Dawson, and he goes by Dawson. Dawson, I appreciate you for being here, man.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me on, so thank you very much.
Let's go. Let's go. So Dawson is a former Wall Street investment banker turned world record holder endurance athlete, as well as author. And after battling high-functioning depression and personal loss, he left the corporate grind to seek purpose through extreme adventure. Dawson has completed the 7 summits, rode across the Atlantic, skied to the South Pole, and holds the solo speed record across the Mojave Desert. Today, he leads the Dawson's Peak Foundation, helping others transform through challenge, service, and the philosophy he calls strength and surrender. His website is dawsonspeak.com. And a quick shout out to Stefano Bonzi for the connection. If you guys need anything recording like music, which you might hear in the background of this podcast, or an audiobook like both Dawson and I have done with Stefano, go to him for all your recording needs, bonzirecording.com. So Dawson, again, once again, I appreciate you being here, man.
No, man, I've been looking forward to this. We've been talking for a couple weeks now, so I'm glad we could finally make this happen. That you could work me into your busy schedule, so I appreciate that.
Appreciation right back to you. So the overall theme for this particular episode I have is leaving comfort, finding clarity, and the adventure of surrender. I usually like to start with something about inspiration. So maybe you could tie in. What does that mean? Like how do you tie in inspiration and put it into action? Let's start with that.
Man, you're coming out with a tough one right out of the blocks. I don't think I've ever thought about it in that specific context. I think it depends on what your definition of inspiration is, and whether you're talking about personal inspiration or inspiration of others. I think it depends on how kind of how you want to take it. But more than anything, I think what it comes down to me, and what I question myself about on a daily basis is, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And what I've found over the years is the more clarity I can gain on that, number one, and the more I can take and apply that purpose, not just to myself, but to others, of how can I be of service to others, is that helps to, I guess to tie it back in, inspire me to try to do more, not only in my personal development, but in the ways that I can contribute to everyone else. Because at the end of the day, if you're just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. We're here for two reasons, and 2 reasons alone: to grow and to live with purpose, and to use that growth and purpose to elevate others. And if you're just using one of those, then you're missing the whole thing of what it could be.
Absolutely love that. I like to start with that because it kind of sets a tone for this conversation. And the purpose of this podcast and the reason why I started this journey is to definitely inspire someone else. But I like how you said that too: inspire yourself first, so that you can really be an inspired leader, right? I think that's kind of the next step to having your own inspiration, leading others, like you just said. So thank you for that. This concept of surrender, we were talking about this before the show started, and this is your book, by the way, for the audience, Strength and Surrender. Great book. I've been starting to get into it. Maybe you could just share a little bit about that. Like, what is that? Like surrender and how that fits into the inspiration theme.
Yeah, it's when most people think about surrender, they think about it in a negative connotation, because they think about it, say, in the concept of war or battle or some type of confrontation. And what you and I talked about before we got on is there's a time to fight and there's a time to surrender. And you can't go through life just doing one thing. You got to move between the two of them. But what I found was just with my mentality, and you're probably similar, I'm sure a lot of people listen are very similar. It's that, you know, if we're not careful, we spend our entire lives fighting everything. And it's that old adage that if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And the issue is you may accomplish things in the short term and you may accomplish big things, but that's not something that's going to help you succeed over the long term and to help you achieve everything you can possibly achieve. So maybe you're achieving on a lower level, but you're not going to kind of get to that next level. So when we talk about strength and surrender in the simplest terms, it's simply allowing your fears and hesitations and trepidations to move into you, to face them, not to run from them, to move into you and to envelop you and to fill them entirely, but most importantly, to allow them to move through you to where they're not taking root within you and they're not moving you. So it's a matter of learning how to meet your needs and accomplish your goals in different ways. But a lot of times people take it as an assault on their ego because they're sitting there saying to themselves, I'm not weak. I'm not going to surrender and I'm going to overcome and overpower everything. I'm like, I get it, tough guy. You're really tough. We're all impressed. But it's just the greatest challenge I have faced in my entire life, without question, is learning to surrender more and more simply, and that's simply being to face whatever the challenges that I'm facing and to be unmoved by it. And in fact, choose my response to it and allow it to move through me and then move on to the next thing.
It's really cool. I'm a spiritual person, Dawson, and there's a spiritual concept called being 0 point. It's kind of similar to like champion mindset, where you're not too high, not too low. You're just kind of neutral, all the time. Is that kind of what you mean by surrender? Like surrender to the emotions, surrender to the outcomes? Is that kind of what you're bringing
See,
forth?
yeah, it is and it isn't. It's like, because look, is I enjoy getting jacked up on things. I enjoy the aggression of change, of overcoming a challenge, and it's, if you're doing that, it's easy to get jacked up too much on too many things. And at the same time, however high you're willing to go, you're probably going to be going low that same degree or even worse, because intensity goes both ways.
Right.
So it is a matter of managing intensity, but it's more a matter of management rather than turning it down. So it's finding the appropriate times to turn it up, the appropriate times to turn it down, but it's simply to remain unmoved in these things where if you choose to dial it up, it's an active choice and it's not a reactive, choice to something that's moving you without your consent or and without your conscious knowledge or subconscious knowledge of being moved by it.
I think it's really interesting in the context of athletics and entrepreneurship, which is, most of my audience. Um, we like to go, go, go. We like to, and even like I'm an Aries, right? We like to take action all the time. We like to do stuff. Um, how can someone like me, who's just going all the time, how can I use that concept of surrender and use it in a way that's productive?
It's, I think, the one of the biggest things is to learn to sit quietly with yourself first.
Yeah.
They say that that's one of the hardest things for any of us to do, is just to sit quietly with ourselves, because there's a big difference between being busy and being productive. Is I can sit here and fiddle around on my phone or send emails, do all this, and I'm like, oh, I would just work for 15 hours straight. Give me a cookie, give me my reward. But how productive was I, not only in accomplishing the tasks that I sought out to accomplish, but then moving myself along this larger spectrum that I'm trying to move as I develop as a person, as a professional, as a friend, as a mate, as a whatever. So it's very counterintuitive, and that's what I think leads people. One of the biggest reasons people are scared to do it is by slowing down. You can actually become faster on the back end. It's kind of like that old thing we talk about in military: slow is smooth and smooth is fast. It's that kind of, it's kind of that kind of mindset. But again, it's not about dialing it down. It's about choosing when and where to apply all this energy, and that comes from a base ultimately of stability, where you can make that decision, and that stability comes ultimately from being able to sit quiet with yourself and understand what you're feeling, why you want to do all these things at these rates, and is that the right thing that you need to be doing. Because just because you can do it and you can do it very well and you can do it very fast doesn't mean it's necessarily even the right thing to be doing.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for being a fan of the show. I really appreciate your support. And if you'd like to further support the podcast, please grab a copy of my book, The Inspired Athlete. The Inspired Athlete is all about my personal growth journey, my athletic journey, my spiritual journey, all combined into one. And really the idea is that the energy of the inspired athlete is within us all, and it's up to us to evoke that. And whether you consider yourself an athlete or a competitor or not, it's my belief that the energy of the inspired athlete is within us. Even if you just decide to take a deep breath and just move your body, that's the inspired athlete. So it would mean a lot if you could help support the book project as well as the podcast by grabbing a copy. Links to the Amazon paperback version as well as the Audible audiobook version are listed below in the description. Thank you very much for your support. Stay inspired, y'all. Yeah, when you sit with yourself and just be quiet and find that meditative state, which I think is becoming more popular now culturally. I think more and more people are talking about the power of this idea of surrendering kind of to yourself, right? Surrendering to maybe you could even say your higher self, or your spiritual self, or your true self, not the ego that wants to do all this stuff all the time, but the self that's here for maybe a bigger reason. How do you really tune into that voice and let the other voice kind of quiet down a little bit? Because I feel like there's two voices kind of competing all the time.
Shit, if you only have two, I think you're doing well. I feel like I've got 20.
Right,
I've got
right,
20 on it here, most of the times.
right.
I think a lot of it does come with physically getting quiet and getting small. And what I mean by that is literally turning the phone off, turning the computer off, getting away from people, getting away from things that you see, constantly, all around you, and just trying to get to an atmosphere where it allows your mind to expand to where you're not automatically filling in the pieces that you see in everyday life. And then and to sit there, physically sit there with yourself. And what you'll find is when you're kind of sitting there and you've got no distractions or people talking to you or music, is your mind will go to different places and over different times. So, give you an example is I meditate. That's probably the second thing I do every single morning. And when I first sit down, and I've been doing this for years, when I first sit down, normally what I think is, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. I want to go look at I want to start sending emails. I want to make my shake. I want to start stretching. I want to do all this stuff. And then after a minute, I feel differently. After 5 minutes, I feel differently. After 20 minutes, I feel differently. If I stay in an hour, I feel differently. And it's just, you don't know where your mind's going to go. So you got to give yourself and your mind a chance to go to these other places. And the only way to do that is to give it the time and energy that it requires. And a lot of that, again, is just getting quiet and just physically sitting. Or, you can even get out and do something like in a productive state where, a lot of times it's almost like a meditation while climbing or while running or something like that. But again, it's just allowing your mind to get to a place where it kind of quiets down and opens up. And it always surprises me because you never know the direction it's going to go. And sometimes you're not feeling it. And those days are some of the best days. Other days you feel awesome, then you start to do this kind of stuff. And then it takes you in an entirely different direction that you never even saw coming.
Yeah, no, it's great. I really appreciate how open you are, talking about, the lessons you've learned through meditation and just kind of, obviously we're going to get into the adventure stuff too, but just, you've been really open on other podcasts I've listened to about getting through some depression and getting through like a tough time in your life. Maybe you could share just a little bit for my audience about your journey, coming from an entrepreneur on Wall Street and, making a decision to leave that. And yeah, just share a little bit about you.
Yeah, just quickly I've been involved in finance the last 20 years. Obviously Wall Street is kind of a generic term, but to be clear, I've never been on Wall Street, but I've been in mergers and acquisitions for 20 years. I'm still managing director at a bank where we buy and sell companies between 50 million and 300 million. So what's called middle market companies.
Okay.
Doing that for maybe, I don't know, 14, 15 years. Had good success in it and was living in the Hollywood Hills and could go out and have whatever I wanted within reason and all this kind of stuff. And was going out and partying all the time and like really, really embracing the Hollywood lifestyle. And what I found was no matter what I did, I would just get more and more depressed. And, and whatever other words you want to use. So unhappy, not having, not having a sense of contentment in my life. It just, I knew that something was wrong. And I had this kind of a hole inside of me that had been there for as long as I could remember. But as long as I stayed busy and I threw enough stuff in that hole, whether it was, drinking or partying or buying things or taking trips, then I was able to kind of keep it at peace. But the older I got and the more means that I had, and I just kept filling this hole up and I kept seeing the hole got bigger and bigger and bigger, it kept changing shapes. And no matter what I did, I just continued to feel worse.
Hmm.
And is about that time is my mother passed away. I broke up with a serious girlfriend, and it was time to either check in or check out. And I mean fully check in or literally check out. Is I was just at that point. So with that is I traveled alone to Nepal. I spent 3 weeks hiking around the Mount Everest base camp. And it was on that trip, and we can get into it, it's a longer story, but on that trip is I had a breakdown and a breakthrough unlike I'd ever experienced. Where I mean, I'm literally on my side in the fetal position, just bawling, crying, and just spit and snot and just, I mean, it was the most physical and emotional pain I had ever experienced. But luckily, something inside of me said, don't try to understand this, don't try to rationalize it, don't try to fight it, but surrender to this and just feel it. Because whatever it is, you need this. And I don't know where that came from. And I don't know where that understanding came from. It was just something inside of me. And after that is the universe spoke to me. And you can call it, the universe, you can call it God, a universal unconscious, a collective unconscious, whatever it is to you. And it said two things. And when I heard it is I literally heard it and I felt it. It was like something was there speaking to me. And it said, you're not living with a sense of purpose and your life is only about you. And in that nanosecond, I knew that my life would never be the same. I knew that I had changed, and it helped me to understand the power and the magnitude and the potential that we have to change for good or for bad in any given second. And that's what really started the journey that I've been on the last several years, since basically 2017, something like that. It's just kind of searching for ways to pursue of rededicating my life to living with purpose and for living for something greater than myself. And we all have our own paths, and we all got to figure it out as we're going along. But starting the foundation that you mentioned, Dawson Speak Foundation, starting to do these different events that I've been doing, where we're really trying to raise awareness, and also we've been raising money for veterans foundations. It's been a great path, but it's still one I continue to learn about every day and continue to revise. And it's all part of the journey.
Yeah, no, I really like your story, and I really appreciate that vulnerability of like sharing that emotional output. Could we talk about a little bit about that and lean into that a little bit? Because I feel like when I see that visual of you just like crying and letting it all out, I actually feel like that's a really healthy release. I feel like most of us, including me, we don't allow ourselves to do that enough, maybe. Could you talk a little bit about that? Like what was that? Where'd that come from? Yeah.
It's so where well, it's a good question about where it came from. So, and I think that it came kind of what preceded it, and then where it came from on the inside are two different questions or two
Okay.
different questions. And
Okay.
just quickly, just before that happened, when it happened, I was in this tiny village in the Himalayas called Tengboche. And I'd been invited to join a Buddhist service at the monastery there. It's the largest monastery in the area. And obviously this is a much longer story, so I'm condensing it. But as I sat alone in a room with chanting monks, Buddhist monks, for about an hour, and during this service, something inside of me said, "Hey, dumbass, let your ego go. Don't try to do anything here. Just be present. Just sit here, shut the hell up, and just experience and feel this." Because I had a very bad habit of living my entire life in my head. Is I tried to rationalize everything. I can, it just and overpower everything. So it just said, just sit here and experience this. And during this service, after maybe 30, 45 minutes, these waves of energy were hitting me to the point where it was difficult to breathe. I was sitting there like physically shaking and physically trying to get my breath because it's just something was happening. I was experiencing something that I'd never ever felt before, and I'm still got goosebumps, thinking about it. And then after the service, is I was walking back across the village, and this, I mean, like 50 people live here. It's a tiny, tiny village. And I stopped and I sat against a stupa, which is a small religious kind of monument. And I'm just sitting there leaning against this gate that's outside of it. And I'm looking right at Everest. And now it's like 6:30 in the morning, something like that. And Everest is still 5 days away, but she's so big you can see her. You know, the sun's rising and the clouds are moving across. Like this is as picturesque as you can possibly imagine. And just in that moment, out of nowhere, without me thinking about it consciously, that's when I lost it. And again, this wasn't just I shed a tear. I mean, this is in the fetal position. I was at the time, I'm in my late 30s. I'm 242 pounds. I've got a beard, down to here. And I'm like this tough looking guy. I mean, bawling uncontrollably for probably 10, 15, 20 minutes, something like that. I collected myself. I went in to get some breakfast and I'm sitting around and I'm surrounded by a bunch of people in this little tea house. They bring me a bowl of oatmeal and I lost it again. And now this is in front of everybody. I know they're looking at me like, who is this asshole over here, having this breakdown? And I mean, I've got my face covered, my head's down because I'm embarrassed because I feel embarrassed, obviously. And I cried so long and so hard into that bowl of oatmeal. I watched my tears fill up the bowl. That's the volume that we're talking about. But the cool thing and that's when that voice said something to me, is I heard it in my heart. I heard it in my fibers and cells. I heard it. It's not just with my ears, like I felt it. And in that moment, I understood that you're not supposed to fight your way through everything. Is that you're supposed to allow this stuff into you, and you don't just live in your head. You don't just live in your heart, but you move freely between the two of them. And it took that level of pain and surrender subconsciously to get me to understand that lesson. And it just that's what really kind of started the journey.
So thank you. I appreciate that share. And the first thing that comes to mind when I'm like seeing that visual of you is this pain to purpose idea, right? Because like I'm in the personal growth industry. I feel like we all are actually. We're all here to grow, whether we like embrace that or not. We are all about our own growth. Those of us that choose to really grasp it, I think we can like level up. But I think we're all about that growth. But the pain to purpose idea, like does that resonate? Like did you find your purpose in that moment? Did it take some time? Are you still looking for that purpose now? It seems like you have it, and I want to talk about the adventures that followed that. But yeah, like talk about that pain to purpose concept.
What I've figured out is the more I do, the less impressed I am with what I've done.
Wow.
And that's, let's say, on a physical sense. On an emotional, psychological development, the more I come to understand, the more I realize I don't know. And the more certain I am about things, the more I realize I don't know.
Hmm.
So to answer your question is, I know, and I figured out in that moment that my purpose was to help others avoid that pain, confusion, and frustration that I faced for so many decades, where you are lost, alone in this darkness, and you don't know how to get out of it. You don't know how to properly communicate it, and you feel like you're the only one that is struggling with this. And whether that's just kind of personal demons or struggling with drugs and alcohol or other some type of addiction or whatever it is I know firsthand how scary and how debilitating that place is. And I was in it for decades. And I don't care how much money you make. I don't care you went to school. I don't care how many people you've dated, what you buy, what you sell. I don't care, because it doesn't matter. Is I want to help people avoid that place because I was in it for so long. And again, that's why I think I'm here. And now it's a matter of figuring out what's the best, most conducive way of doing that. And hell, I don't have the answers. It's just I'm trying to do the best I can to figure that out. But after that moment, it took several years for me to figure out a way to do it. Of, hey, maybe I can start a foundation. We can do these big, physical feats, get people to watch our athletes or to watch me or whomever it is, and draw a parallel between themselves and what we're doing, and saying, hey, if this person is doing X, Y, and Z, I can find something comparable in my life, and I can start to apply myself to overcome this thing or learn from it. And that's kind of the evolution of how we've gotten where we are.
Hey guys, Just wanted to take a quick moment to share my new music, an instrumental track called Small Waves featuring Brian Schwartz on trumpet and yours truly on acoustic guitar. And this music is very much inspired by the ocean and specifically watching small waves crash on each other. When I look at the ocean and watch small waves, I'm able to kind of tap into that flow state, and hopefully this music is reflective of that. You can find all the links to the music below in the description, and I would love to hear from you if you like the music and you're able to tap into that flow state as well. Let me know. Stay inspired, y'all, and keep exploring that creativity. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. So let's talk a little bit about that pain just for a few more minutes, because I think that's really relatable. I think a lot of us go through stuff, but maybe not all of us get to that point of like screw it all. But it sounds like you got pretty close to that for decades. You mentioned, what do you say to someone right now who might be listening or watching who's like going through it too? Going through it in a dark place, and it just found this video or podcast and is like, okay, well, I'm there too. Help me.
I think the biggest thing to understand is that you're not alone. Is we lie to ourselves when we're going through these things. We think that no one in the history of the world has ever been through what we're going through, and no one could possibly understand. And the only reason that we're here is because either we screwed something up so bad that we created this, now we deserve it, or because we've been victimized to a degree where we have no control over our responses to things, and now we're here. So that's the biggest thing is to understand, is that whether it's you or me or the guy sleeping on the street or the president of the United States, it doesn't matter, is that we're all the same things. We're all the same person looking for the same things, just going about it in different ways.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing to understand, is that whatever you're experiencing, you're not alone. It's been experienced billions and billions and billions of times by billions of people. And I don't care what it is. I think that's one of the biggest things that people need to understand. But it's coming from a guy, to your point, is, look, I've been there with a loaded gun to my head, with my finger on the trigger, pulling the slack out of it. Like, I mean, I know what it is to be as close as you can possibly be to making that decision. And there's a way to come back from that. But it's simply a matter of figuring out what's going to work for you. And you have to ultimately make the decision if you're going to do the work. Because, life is, when Buddha talks about the Four Noble Truths, the first noble truth is that life is suffering. And he doesn't mean like it's, like your hands on a hot stove. It's just that there are things that are difficulties or exist in life. And so you have to understand is that pain exists in life. And it's either going to be pain that you create in your life where you're trying to better yourself and you're doing difficult things, or it's pain that's going to be reacting or acting upon you. So you're going to hurt one way or another. You got to choose productive pain here. And I think by doing that and making that decision, you can come out of these dark places. But ultimately, it comes down to you got to make the decision to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. It also makes me think of movement, right? And I want to get into some adventure stuff here, but like one of the first things that I like to do if I'm ever in a dark place, which I still, I wrote a book about inspiration, but the reason why I did that is because I was I was the uninspired athlete for a long time. And I realized that I could help people prevent that, right? Because that's a dark place too. I was in a bad spot where I was just like, I'm done. I don't care about anything. I'm very apathetic. I remember there's a certain moment of my life where I was just apathetic. I was like, I don't want to do anything. I'm done. I have no inspiration for anything. And knowing what I know now with all the tools, you mentioned meditation, there's visualization, there's all these different cool, health tips now, breath work and cold dips and, all kinds of cool stuff going on, intermittent fasting and cleanses and all kinds of stuff to kind of help you kind of feel the inspired athlete energy. But like, that's part of my purpose now. And I want to prevent that, because you don't have to go through that stuff to get to a place of inspiration or motivation or being the best version of yourself, right? I mean, am I right about that?
Yeah, no, as I agree with you. And it's important for people to understand is a lot of people erroneously believe once you're quote unquote on the path, then every day is just gumdrops and puppy dogs and rainbows and everything else. I'm telling you, just like you mentioned, That's not the case.
Right. Right.
Is I train over 800 hours a year, and there are plenty of times the last thing in the world that I want to do is go out and train or work on the foundation or return somebody's call or do whatever I'm need to be doing. So it's like it's not it everything it's going to be a struggle. Is that's just life, and people have to understand that is even when you're on that path, it's not all of a sudden going to get easy, but it's about making that decision every single second of am I going to am I going to do something that's going to help elevate me here to ultimately elevate others, or am I going to do something that's not going to elevate me? And that's really
Right.
what it comes down to.
Right.
It's just
Right.
it's just making that decision time and time and time and time. It might be 50 times a day. It might be 1,000 times a day, whatever the number is. It's just continuously making that decision is all it is.
And that's why we like having these conversations, right? And that's why I like publishing these and sharing these because these help, I think, in my opinion. I think these help to like, hear wisdom from someone like you who's been, like you said, like almost pulling that trigger to like setting world records. That's inspiring to me to be able to bounce back from a dark place and just to allow yourself to go for it. I think going for it, like you mentioned, like being on that path. I think that's being on that path, like feeling all those feelings and saying, you know what, I'm going to choose a different direction. Could you expand a little bit on that for people who might be like, being on what path? Like, what do you mean by that? What does that mean?
I think the path is it's conditional and it's personalized.
Mm,
That your path is different than my path. Is that somebody might be on their perfect path, but if I'm on that path, it's not going to work for me because we all have we all have different unique gifts, meaning things that we can bring to the world in a way that no one else can. Like you can do things and in certain ways that I could never do, and I shouldn't try to emulate those, and or replicate those. And the same thing with you and I. So it's about kind of and it ties back into that sitting quietly with yourself. And when you're doing that is you understand or either you understand or you gain a better insight or knowledge about fully understanding kind of why you're here and what you want to accomplish, the impact you want to have, and in figuring out what are vehicles of ways for me delivering this to the world.
yeah.
And it's just very individualized. And the other thing is once you're on it, it doesn't have to be the same thing for the rest of your life. You might be doing one thing here and then doing something else here and doing something else here because as we're evolving, we're supposed to be growing, not just there's a big difference between change and growth, in that all growth is change, but not all change is growth. Those are two big differences. There are big differences between those two words, rather. So that's what is you got to give yourself the ability to change once you're kind of on that path. Because sometimes you think you're doing the right things for the right reasons, and you discover a little while later, I could be doing something a little bit better. Or
Yeah.
maybe I wasn't acting as earnestly and honestly as I thought I was. And now you've kind of gained some insight. Now you kind of change it up a little bit. And you have to give yourself that ability and that flexibility to change as you learn and as you grow.
Yeah. I love that. Let's talk a little bit about adventure mindset. I have to share, and Tyler, if you're listening, this is a shout out to you. So I have to share about my friend Tyler Rootkin, who's a good friend of mine. He inspired me on this idea called adventure mindset. That's kind of his brand. He rode his bike across the United States, and that was really inspiring to me. He also did a big hike up and down the John Muir Trail, and I'm inspired by this concept of adventure mindset. So before I define my version of that, I was hoping someone like yourself who's been so traveled and had so many adventures all over the world, maybe you could define that. What is that adventure mindset?
And that's a tough one. That's I mean, you can take that so many directions. Um, I would say the adventure mindset is being open to opportunities and possibilities with a willingness and an ability to change, to address them the best way possible without being stagnated about requiring a certain circumstance or a certain response. And I could have said that more articulately. I apologize for that. But basically just being open and flexible, to what comes and then
Yeah.
what your response is going to be in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk about some of your adventures for a moment here, Dawson. I mean, well, actually, before you talk about some specific adventures, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Talk about your decision to be like, you know what? I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna go do the Everest and I'm gonna go row across it. Talk about the mindset of that first before you actually did it.
Yeah, so it's in 2000, late 2018. A good friend of mine, Jay Jablonski, is when I came back from a couple trips I'd been on, and I kind of had the idea of Dawson's Peak Foundation in my mind. I got with Jay and told him that I wanted to start it and what I was thinking, so he was on board with that. And we were trying to think of ways that we could garner as much attention as possible, as quickly as possible.
Yep.
And so, with that is we put together what's called Project 7 for Soldiers, where we're working with Gary Sinise Foundation, Hope for the Warriors, which are two of the highest rated veteran charities in the country. And we agreed that they would receive 100% of the net proceeds from the project. So I haven't made a dime. The organization hasn't made a dime. And I've self-funded, most of this stuff. But it's we said, how can we, and really back up, the
Yeah.
reason those veterans is because we wanted to exemplify that all this wasn't just about me or about us as an organization. And we thought veterans were the perfect examples of people that really put others first in so many ways. So as a way to exemplify that and to thank them for their service. So then he and I just started kind of brainstorming, like what would be interesting, what would be fun, what do we think would get attention. So we came up with the Explorers Grand Slam, which had been around for years. At that time, I think it maybe 45 people had ever done it, which is climbing the highest peak on each continent, skiing to the North Pole, South Pole. I was like, all right, we'll do that. And mind you, at this time, I'm still 220 something pounds, have no training experience whatsoever. And I was like, that's great, but we can do more. So then, well, maybe we'll row across the Atlantic Ocean. So we looked at time frames, like I think we could fit that in. And then I'm like, all right, that sounds good. What else can we do? And then it's like, well, maybe we can do this, which is go across the Mojave Desert. And then originally we were going to fly a plane around the world during the same, and it was going to be all during 12 months. And we was like, we got to do all this within 12 months. And then long story short, we got everything done except for the flight, which got shut down because of COVID. And then the North Pole, which got shut down because of COVID. And it's heartbreaking because in March of 2022, when Russia went into Ukraine, is I was halfway across the row across the Atlantic, and that's when we got word. And obviously, it's more importantly is the hardships that the Russians and the Ukrainians are facing, during that conflict. And
Yeah.
but that's when we learned that we lost the North Pole, and it put all this effort into it and everything. And that was heartbreaking for a variety of reasons, but that was kind of the idea, of the project and how it kind of came together.
Thank you to new sponsor of the show, Stretchlyfe, located in Manhattan Beach, California. Stretchlyfe offers assisted stretching for anyone who wants to enhance their flexibility practice. And if you're like me, muscle tightness is something I deal with on a daily basis, whether I'm in the gym training or out on the beach playing beach volleyball or even sitting here doing this podcast. It's a challenge to make time for the daily stretch routine. And so I've been working with Amir over the last couple months over at Stretchlyfe, and I can tell a big difference in the way I feel. I have more range of motion, I have more energy, more muscle control, and just overall less pain. Stretchlyfe is offering Within the Game listeners 50% off your first session. Just mention Within the Game when you book online or when you call in for the discount. And also, if you do not have access to the Stretchlyfe studio, but you still want to learn more about how to enhance your flexibility practice, Amir is offering a free 20-minute phone call where he can share specific stretches and other specific tools that can help you. So visit stretchlyfe.com, that's Stretchlyfe spelled with a Y, to book your first session, and hope you enjoy the rest of the show. It's so cool. And so talk a little bit about that row. I've heard you talk about this on other podcasts. I really want you to share this with my audience. I mean, that definitely Everest too, and definitely the Mojave Desert. But I want to hear about that row, because that just seems super intense. Talk about that. The rowing across the Atlantic Ocean.
Well, it's not. It's funny. It's the farthest thing from intense I think you can find.
Really?
So effing monotonous. It's unbelievable.
But okay, you're right. I get that, but intense up here, right?
I understand the point you're making. I feel like it is and it isn't. I think
Okay.
it's down to individual mindset and how you approach it.
Okay.
There is an intensity there because you've got to be on the entire time. And so I did it with a partner, Patrick Favre, and we did a 21 and a half foot boat from Canary Islands to Guadeloupe in the French West Indies. It took us just over 53 days, like 53 days in a couple hours. And the thing is about ocean rowing is there's no timeout. There's no stop button. Like once you start, you keep going until the boat sinks, you fall out, or you hit land. I mean, those are your three options. And we each rode 12 hours a day, and he and I never missed a shift, and the shift would go from 1 to 4 hours. And it's just the boat never stops moving. It's so loud inside the cabin. It's just like nails on a chalkboard. And it's just everything is difficult. Whether you're eating, because I ate, cold, dehydrated meals, the entire time, whether it's you're purifying your water, like going to the bathroom, doing your laundry, whatever it is, everything is difficult, and it never ever stops. Like you never get a break mentally or emotionally because you've always got to be on the lookout for kind of what's coming on, coming up, and staying out in front of it. And so that's kind of the taxing part. But once you get into it, it was relatively enjoyable because you gain a sense of insight of like, man, this is so difficult. But then you think about other things that people face around the world on a daily basis and how millions of people would give everything they have to be in the position that I'm in voluntarily. And once you have that change of perspective, it really changes the trip entirely.
That's like that I get to instead of
Yeah.
I have to kind of
Yeah.
mindset, right? I,
Yeah.
I think this is a great spot to ask you about the appreciation that I've heard you talk about before. Appreciation, where and not just appreciation for all things is kind of the bigger picture of appreciation, right? It's one thing to appreciate yourself or something or someone, but to have appreciation for all things. Talk about that concept.
Far too often, our perspective gets skewed, meaning that it's either in the wrong direction or it's the wrong size. We're looking at it from either the wrong angle or the wrong altitude. And that's something that I think about a lot about is on a daily basis is a proper perspective. And I think through that proper perspective is when you get proper appreciation. And it's to your point that you just mentioned about, a lot of times we're in positions because we voluntarily put ourselves in those positions or we get to be in those positions. So when I hear athletes talking about, oh, this sucked, or about how horrible this thing was, about some race, I'm like, I don't want to hear it. I know it's difficult. I know it hurts. I know you just broke a finger or whatever happened, but you're in that position because you have the ability to be in that position. I was like, so there's a big difference uh, between kind of sucks and things that are hard. But what I found is the more I can practice the practice of appreciation, it helps me with my perspective, and the perspective helps me with the appreciation. That's what's really kind of transitioned in my life to a much better place. And even if I'm out on a mountain doing a climb practice, or training, if I'm carrying a 100-pound pack, whatever, 2,000 feet up a mountain, it doesn't suck. It's difficult, but there are plenty of people that are confined to wheelchairs or beds or don't have limbs or whatever that would get everything that they have in order to be where I am. It's really everything that we do in our lives. We need to look at it in that way, and it kind of gives us a chance to get away from things and just open up our perspective. And that's what's made such a difference for me.
I really appreciate that perspective. And it begs this question, like, so you do this endurance training. Actually, I have to ask you, did you do training before that year, or did you just kind of immerse yourself into it?
Yeah, the way it worked was I started training on August 1st, 2018, and we were going to kick this thing off in April of 2020. And so it gave me 18 months to go from zero to trying to set 7 world records. And this was at 40 years old. So this is not, I'm not, I'm not like a 22-year-old doing this stuff. This was 40 years old with no background whatsoever. And then COVID came in and delayed everything a year. So I trained for a full 30 months just to get to the starting line. You're talking nearly 3 years, 3 surgeries, multiple surgical procedures, thousands and thousands of hours of training just to get to the starting line to try to do, what I was going to do.
And amazing. And so like this endurance training that you do, how does that mirror like entrepreneurship or even having a creative idea or a leap?
It's a lot of it is showing up every single day, because this endurance stuff is consistency is by far the biggest component of it. And it's not sexy training. You're not out there sprinting or jumping or powerlifting stuff, whatever. It's just a lot of it is just slow, long, monotonous work where you're just grinding for hours, anywhere between normally 20, 25 hours a week is what I'm doing. And as I train 100% alone, because I don't want someone there that I have to rely upon in order to get done what I need to get done. So I think that correlates a lot to entrepreneurship, to being in relationships, to being a parent, to being a friend, to being whatever, is continuously showing up time and time again, whether you want to be there or not. It's kind of like, I don't care what you feel. I'm not worried about your feelings. It's important to understand what you're feeling and why you're feeling, but more importantly, what are your goals here? What is your purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? And then showing up for that day and day and day again.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, I can relate to that. I know my audience can relate to that too, because as athletes and entrepreneurs, that's what we do. We kind of grind. We like put our head down and we just say, okay, let's go to work. Um, but lately, I want to kind of share this too. Lately, I think the new grind, it's called glide. I heard that before from somebody, and I actually really liked it. There is something to be said for just grinding and pushing yourself, but there's also something to be said for gliding, which is like maybe a little less resistant. Does that resonate with you?
No, it does, because I think that ties back well to what we're saying is you can confuse grinding with fighting.
Yeah.
You don't want to, and when I say grind, and that doesn't mean fight your way through everything, but it means getting done what you need to get done.
Yeah.
But to your point about the gliding, is look, the whole purpose when you're doing endurance type stuff, it's not, your goal is not just to complete whatever it is you're doing, especially in your training. It's to complete whatever it is you're doing, but to do it as efficiently as possible.
Right.
If I get done with a training run, unless I'm out there to absolutely kill myself, which is rare, is I want to get done and feel like I've got 80% left in the tank as opposed to 10% left in the tank. If I'm sitting there fighting every single step and I, mentally and emotionally and physically,
Right.
it's not the way to do it. There are times that you're going to have to do that. But yeah, as I completely agree, is as efficiently as we can accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, we need to, because you never know what's next. Is you might think you're at the finish line, then you come around the bend or you come to the top of the mountain, and there's another damn mountain to climb. Destroyed yourself just to get there. Good luck with the other mountain. So I like, I've never heard that, but I can appreciate elements of that.
Yeah, yeah. And even further on that point, um, bringing this back to the concept of surrender, how do you balance grit and grace, like pushing hard versus letting go?
Well, it's important to understand that surrender is not letting go. It's not saying, hey, whatever happens happens, and just, hey man, and it's, again, it's a matter of you're surrendering to the ability of things to move you, and to be fearful of these things, to where your fear is going to make you go in a different direction. And again, it's finding more positive ways of dealing with these trials and tribulations and fears, that we all experience. So that's
Yeah.
I think the important distinction to remember there. And that's where a lot of people kind of confuse and have that negative connotation with surrender. Is this
Yeah.
is very much a positive, proactive way of approaching things, not a negative, reactive way of just saying, hey, I'm gonna let everything just kind of impact me and just sit back and whatever happens, happens.
No, I think it's a really important distinction. And then it actually brings up this other thought because I talk a lot about positive self-talk. I wrote about that. I want to ask you about that because maybe you could take yourself back to Everest. Let's actually talk about Everest for a second. The highest mountain in the world. What kind of self-talk did you give yourself on that trip? Could you think back to that ascent and like was your self-talk all positive? Was it like oh like talk about your self-talk on that trip?
The self-talk on Everest for me is probably it's very similar to the other self-talk that I have, which is normally, I would say, I've never quantified this before, so I'm just thinking off the top of my head, probably 95% neutral or negative with a smattering of something positive. And what I mean by that is when I perform the way I feel I should perform, I'm not looking for a pat on the back because I'm like, you should do that. You should be capable of that. You should have accomplished that. And if I don't meet that standard, is I have a bad habit of being too negative or too hard on myself to where it's not productive. If you can do it in a productive way, that's great. But if you're doing it to where it's a negative thing, it's not helping you. It's not helping anybody else. And that's still something that honestly that I struggle with, on a day-to-day basis that I'm working to get over. But with
Yeah.
with the Everest, it's just it's like any of this stuff we're talking about is you just have to keep showing up again and again, and whether that's on a weekly basis because I was there for 2 months, which so I did a traditional climb of it. Guys are doing it faster now. So whether it's on a weekly basis, daily basis, hourly basis, or sometimes it's just taking the next step. Because when you're up, at 28,000 feet, even if you have that oxygen, is you're standing there sometimes like, how many steps do I need to take here? Like, I got to take 3 steps. And if you're walking at the mall, going to buy a t-shirt, you don't think anything about it. But when you're there, you're like, oh my God, I need to take 3 steps right now. And it's making that decision of showing up again and again and again. But it gets down to that point sometimes where it's just one more step. Just, I don't know if I can do 4 more, but I know I can do 1 more. So I'm going to do 1 more, then I'm going to figure it out. Then I'm going to figure it out. And that's for parts of Everest, that's what it turned into.
I love that mindset. Um, can you talk about fear a little bit? Because like when I'm picturing myself up there, like fear has to be a part of the picture, right? How do you manage your fear? Like if you fall, if you die,
Yeah.
what if something happens? How do you manage that on these trips?
It's everybody's different. And I'm not trying to sound, like a tough guy or anything like that. But that the way that I approach fear in that regard, that kind of stuff normally doesn't bother me. Because you see a number of people that have passed away. There were 2 climbers that were there that passed a couple days before that were still attached to the rope that you had to climb over. Then there's a point where between the South Summit and the Hillary Step, which is a Cornice traverse, where you're talking thousands of feet down each side. And dealing with that kind of stuff, it's never really bothered me because it's I would rather go out in that way trying to accomplish my goal than not try to accomplish my goal and be around for 100 years. It's just kind of how I approach things. So I think a lot of it is, and again, is I'm not trying to sound like a tough guy here at all, but it's just I think it's about how we can compartmentalize what we're trying to accomplish, and then how we prioritize whatever it is, and is accomplishing whatever you're going to accomplish. Where does that lie in your priority list, versus safety? A good example is when I was on Aconcagua, is a partner and I climbed that. Normally that's like a 12, 14-day trip, and we did it in 3.5 days right after I came from Antarctica, where so I lost all my acclimatization. And Aconcagua is the highest peak outside the Himalayas. It's just over 20,000 feet. I forget, 20, 22, 23, something like that. I'm blanking now. But is towards the top of that climb is I was in bad shape. Like I had cerebral edema. Like I couldn't stop myself from shaking. My vision was going in and out. I didn't know if I was going to poop my pants or pass out or throw up on every single step. And that was a very concerning time, just from a self-preservation standpoint. But I asked myself, I'm like, what's your priority right now? Is your priority completing this or giving yourself a chance to complete it, or is it going down and being safe? And there are certain, at that time, as I made the decision, and everybody has their own decision point, is I was like, I would rather die on this mountain than go home not having given this a chance. And I'm not saying that's the right decision, but for me in that moment, that was my decision.
Wow. Wow. What else comes to mind when you think back to that year? All these different adventures that you write about eloquently in this book, and I'm gonna link this book. Everyone should grab a copy of this and check out some of the details of the stories. But yeah, what else comes to mind right now?
The I would say probably two or a couple things. One is I always think about what I could have done better.
Mm,
What could I have been more efficient at? Because it's one thing looking at why we're doing what we're doing. It's not just for me to go out and do all this cool stuff, but it's to help people, live better, more purposeful lives. And it was to help the veterans with Gary Sneed's Foundation Hope for the Warriors. And
right.
we were able to raise, a lot of good attention for them and get eyeballs on them. Able to raise, a decent amount of money, but I wish we could have gotten more attention on them. I wish we could have raised, more money, and I would have traded some of my success for more of that success. So I think things like that is what could I have done better? And honestly, it still kind of eats me up. What still eats me up is that I didn't get a chance to do everything that I wanted to do, and it was totally outside of my control. Meaning that when I was rowing across the Atlantic, Russia goes into Ukraine, and now the North Pole is canceled. And then because of COVID and because of all things related to it, is we couldn't fly around the world. And to put so much time and energy into something and then not to even get the chance to perform, it's very easy to feel like something was taken from you and to feel
Mm,
victimized. And so I had to really, really fight not to fall into that mindset. But I look back on it, there's a lot of points where I'm very grateful because I think I grew more from having to deal with those perceived failures than I would have gotten out of it if I got a chance to perform and I was successful. So at the end of
mm,
the day, even though I didn't do what I wanted to do, I think I probably grew more individually because I didn't even get the chance to do them, as
yeah.
strange as it sounds.
No, that's really cool. That's really cool. I have to ask what's next because I'm sure there's something cooking.
Yeah. It's funny. It's I've had a couple phone calls this week with some people. I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm not being coy. It's just, in all honesty, I don't know what's next. I've got a couple ideas.
Okay.
Challenge is when you do these big things or you go to certain places, like you go North Pole, South Pole, you're talking a lot of money. So so you got about, getting money from sponsors, new sponsors, public, me financing, and things like that. And a lot of these things take a lot of time to plan. So you might be talking something that's, whatever, 12 months away, 14 months away, and several $100,000 and getting things in place. So I'm trying to figure out right now kind of what my priorities are, what sounds interesting. But I'm still training 15, 20 hours a week, getting my body a little bit of chance to recover, but staying active to where if once I make that decision, I'll be in shape to do it.
I love it. I love it. Talk a little bit about your recovery. I mentioned cold dips. I mentioned, eating well. I mentioned breath work. But how do you best recover?
Yeah. So physically is I train every day, but I take one day a week, which is my recovery day, and on that is normally is I'll swim for
Mm,
about an hour, hour and a half, something like that, because because I'm always pounding on my body and joints and ligaments and tendons and everything. Everything's under compression all the time. So as I just want to get into a pool, do some mobility work, and then just swim and do various strokes, and it's really whatever I want to do. Plus, it sounds strange, the fluidity in the water,
yeah.
being fluid in the water helps me emotionally and psychologically because I have a bad habit of where I can be a very rigid person. I can be very scheduled. I mean, I can eat the same thing every day, train the same time. Like I can just do it. But to be in the water and to be fluid is something that I struggle with from time to time. So that really helps me emotionally as well as physically. Then I'll come back to the house and I'll stretch, for about an hour or something like that. Do active, recovery work. Therabody has come on and provide some just amazing products. Dr. Jason over there, excuse me, over there. So like the recovery boots and the recovery guns and things like that, which have been absolutely instrumental. If people haven't used those things, I'm telling you, for recovery, those are great. And then also is I'll do a big cheat day. So on my diet is normally during the week is my diet is very tight, like no processed foods, no sugars, like artificial sugars, sweeteners, shit like that. But on recovery days, I'll eat 7 to 10,000 calories, and it's just anything and everything I want. So if I want to eat 2 dozen donuts and 3 pounds of cookies and 8 pounds of Twizzlers, I don't care what it is. I will eat as I get about an 8, 9 hour window, and I can eat anything and everything. And that really those things kind of just help me to do it. Then on those days, I just try to relax and just let my mind go and not focus on as many things and just let the body recover.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's a funny visual too. Just give it to me all.
It's bad. It's sometimes I'm just like, and half the time when I get done, I'm like, why did I do that to myself?
Right,
It's
right.
just, hell, it's easy for me to put on 8, 10 pounds. The next morning, as I weigh myself, and I'll be 8, 10 pounds heavier. So I'm just used to it.
I love it. Dawson, we're coming up on our time here, but to finish up, to wrap everything up, I want to ask you just a few more questions if you have time. I want to ask you. I usually start with this. I'm kind of finishing with this. My concept of the inspired athlete, because you seem to be holding that energy. Could you talk about that? What does that mean to you, inspired athlete?
And you're asking good questions. These are
Thanks, man.
and this could be an hour discussion, by itself. It's I would say understanding what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing, and then with that, making the decision to sacrifice, what's required to pursue that goal.
Let's go. Let's go. How about this one, Dawson? An inspired leader. Because, and before you answer, you know what came to my mind when I'm like thinking about your story and thinking about, everything you're talking about? It reminds me of Forrest Gump when he like when he ran across the country, but all these people started following him, right? And it's like I'm thinking about your story and I'm asking you about what's next, and I can almost see like people following you,
Yeah.
and working to be like you. So I don't know, that just came to mind, but like an inspired leader, how would you define that?
Um, I would say someone that puts the betterment or the development of their people before them, and but understanding whatever their style is to accomplish that. Meaning that I think there's three styles of leadership. There's either it kind of ties back to an old adage about a king, a boatman, or a shepherd. And meaning, so it's basically three leadership styles. So a king means you're leading out front. Is that you're doing everything, or you're setting the example, or whatever it is, then everybody's supposed to follow you. The boatman means you're in there with your people. Is essentially, if you're in a boat crossing a river, you're there with them, you're working. And then there's the shepherd, and the shepherd's in the back there, kind of like positioning people, pushing people, but they're not looking for that recognition. They're not looking for to be out front. And I think with my leadership style, it's more that shepherd style of just trying to be the example of the guiding, and kind of here and there, without needing to be out in front and needing that limelight, or really even wanting that limelight, but ultimately trying to look out for the betterment, provide the protection, and contribute to the success in some small way, which is, I think, what hopefully all of us want to do.
Let's go. That's great. I've actually never heard that like when you put it all together like that, those leadership styles. So I really appreciate that, and that resonates. So thank you for that. I feel like we can all tap into those, king energy, shepherd energy. What was the other one?
The boatman,
The
the helmet.
boatman. Yeah, it reminds me of Vasudeva from Siddhartha.
Yeah.
You know that book?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you must because of all your travels in Nepal and stuff.
It's interesting is you don't have to be all the thing, the same thing every time, because there are times you need to get in different positions and lead in different ways. But I think it ultimately comes down to we all have kind of natural leadership qualities, and some people are just naturally in these different positions. So you have to understand what works best for you, and
Yeah.
not to try to be something that you're not.
Yeah.
The most important thing is to be genuine, because when you're
Mm.
not, is people may not be able to sense it, intellectually, but they can sure as hell feel it. People can feel a fraud at a certain point.
Dawson, this has been awesome. Before we kind of wrap things up, just I know you mentioned the foundation again, but to anyone who wants to be involved, with the foundation or wants to follow you or buy your book, just share, your websites or any way people can enroll themselves in what you got going on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So the easiest way is on the website. Is just Dawson's Peak, peak.com. That's my personal site. It links to the foundation site. Like I said, 100% of the net donations, net proceeds, go to benefit Gary Sneed's Foundation, Hope for the Warriors. So I don't make a dime. The organization hasn't made a dime. On Instagram, it's just at Dawson's Peak. And the easiest way to find the book is just going to Amazon, I'm proud to say we hit #1 bestseller in a couple categories on there. So there's the print book, and there's also with Stefano, there's the audio is on there as well.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Dawson, this has been great. The final question I have is fulfillment, like just wrap up everything we've been talking about and just let's finish on that. Fulfillment. What does that mean to you?
I think it's going to be different things for different people. For me, what fulfillment means is doing the things I feel I should be doing for the reasons I feel I should be doing it. And where and not buying my own BS, but knowing that I tried in an honest, earnest manner to accomplish what I set out to accomplish and doing it for the right reasons.
Mic drop. Beautiful. Beautiful. I feel like we all should figure that out for ourselves, right? Like that's why I like to ask that question. Dawson, this has been so cool. I really appreciate you coming on. For all the listeners or viewers, thank you guys for being with us this far, and I appreciate you. Let's go, everybody. Stay inspired.
I really appreciate it, man. It's a great time.
Yeah, don't go anywhere. Thank you so much, everyone. Peace and blessings. Stay inspired, y'all.